So, I had reached Badrinath after a great deal of travel. Took me about 3 months roughly to reach Badrinarayan. And as I said, the priests of Badrinarayan are Nambudris from Kerala. So I went to see the priest, to see the Ravalji, they are called Ravaljis, and I had a meeting with him. Interesting. I was given the name of Shiva Prasad at Haridwar by the Mahamandaleshwar, whom I had met first. So I maintained that name. So when Ravalji asked me, what is your name? I said, Shiva Prasad. Because I thought these Nambudris are such orthodox people from Kerala Brahmins, so I thought better to stick to Shiva Prasad. So I said, Shiva Prasad. Ah, very good, he said. So, you finished your college? I said, almost. So why are you here? I said, I came looking for gurus because I have heard in the Himalayas there are great yogis still living who might be able to guide me because I'm looking for a true and original guru. He started laughing. Then he said, I have not met a single genuine soul here. I was shocked. I said, how is this possible? He said, maybe I have, I'm not sure, but most of these pseudo sadhus all around here, some of them are very rich, and he gave me such a critical view of this whole thing that I began to wonder, is it right to ask? It was wrong to ask this man. Anyway, I said, all right, but can you find me a place to stay? He said, yeah, that I can find you. I'll find a kutir for you across the river, across the Alkananda. Stay for some time. You can get all your food from here because the priests of Badrinath are from Kerala. Badrinarayan regularly gets Kerala food to eat. So I decided I will also get good food and I stayed on. I was missing the food for quite some time. So I stayed on. But every time I met Ravalji, he used to discourage me. He said, I appreciate your search, but you can find it at home also. You are an educated man. You should go back, work for a living. See these buggers, they are all sadhus. Okay. I kind of closed my ears and listened and heard everything that he said, but it didn't register. I was very upset. One day I was so upset. I was so depressed that I decided that I will walk up to Mana, the last village on the border, full of Tibetan weavers, and then go to Vashishta Gufa, which somebody said is beyond, and see if there is anyone there. If I don't find a proper guru or a teacher, then it is better that I commit suicide, because maybe this body is not ready for spiritual instruction, maybe I am not fit for it. Maybe next time I will come back in a better body, in better circumstances, and find a guru and find spiritual fulfillment. So I said to myself, I will go and see. If I don't find anybody, I stood on the banks of the Alkananda and looked down. And in my mind I was calculating how many minutes it will take to die, because the water flows very strongly with a roaring noise from the top. I said to myself, maybe 2 minutes I will be dead, finished. I will close my eyes, meditate and go. So when you discard the body, you get a better body and come back again for spiritual. With this in mind, do or die, I walked up. So I went up to Vyasa Gufa. There was nothing there. Vyasa Gufa now has become so busy, it's not worth going there. That time there was just a small cave. Then I further went up, almost up to Swarga Arohini, near the rocks where the Saraswati river flows. There is a beam pool there. I went to beam pool, then I was quite depressed and I started walking down. On the way I had to pass the Vyas Gufa again. So when I reached Vyas Gufa, I found that there was some fire inside. somebody must be there. There was a dhuni in the mouth of the Vyas Gufa. So if there is a dhuni is the big fire which is lit by yogis who live in these areas, like a campfire. So I said, if there is there must be somebody inside. So I slowly went into the Vyasa Gufa, not expecting anybody, hoping to see some sadhu. I thought maybe I'll spend the night here and meditate. The moment I entered, this person came out of the cave. And I looked at him, and it was the same. It clicked immediately in my mind that this is the same person whom I have seen many years ago when I was a 9-year-old boy playing in the backyard of my house. The man who stood under the jackfruit tree and touched my head. This whole thing flashed into my mind, and I said, I think this is the same person. And unconsciously I exclaimed, Babaji, like that. So, and his first statement was very interesting. He said to me, Acha ghum phir ke aa gaye yahan. You've gone round and come back to me. So I prostrated before him and I said, now all my life till I die, I am not going to leave you. And he said, Dekha jayega, we'll think about it. But then from that time, for 3.5 years, I spent with him, following him wherever he went, learning what he taught, eating what he provided, and living as he wanted me to live. 3.5 years as he traveled, I also traveled. And that night we spent at Vyas Gufa. The next day morning, he took me away from there. We crossed the river, went to a place called Charanapaduka, which is behind the Badrinath temple, which has many caves. As you proceed further up, you see caves on the right side from Charanapaduka. If you go further, it used to be the old route to Kedar, but nobody goes on that way now because it's all broken and ice filled. So, in one of those caves in Charanapaduka is the place where Babaji used to live. Now, when I say Babaji, many people would immediately think that I am talking about Mahavatar Babaji, about whom Yogananda Paramahamsa has written in the autobiography of a yogi. I think in recent times, Rajnikant also made a movie on Babaji. No, I'm not talking about that Babaji. I'm talking about someone whose name was Maheshwarnath Babaji. We used to call him Babaji. In Hindi, Babaji means Appa, father. It means father, mother, everything. So great saints are addressed as Babaji. Maheshwarnath Babaji belonged to the Natha Sampradaya, which is a very old tradition in India. It starts with Adinath, who is considered to be none other than Shiva himself. And from there, Machendranath, and from Machendranath to Gorakhnath, from Gorakhnath to the other Naths. Gorakhnath is the most famous of the Nath Sampradaya saints, and his headquarters is in Gorakhpur, which is on the border of Nepal almost. Now, Maheshwarnath Babaji belonged to the Natha Sampradaya on one side, and on the other side, he was a direct disciple of Sri Guru Babaji, who is referred to in the autobiography as Mahavatar Babaji. In our tradition, in our parampara, we don't call him Mahavatar, we call him Sri Guru Babaji. Because Mahavatar was a word coined by Paramahamsa Yogananda, because this particular being is supposed to have lived for so many years. Many other avatars have come and gone, but he continues to live, so he gave the title of Mahavatar. And the picture of Babaji, Sri Guru, we called him Shri Guru Babaji. He was my Guru's Guru. So normally when I say Babaji, I refer to Maheshwarnath Babaji, who was his disciple, direct disciple. Now there is a picture of Mahavatar Babaji or Shri Guru Babaji in the autobiography of a yogi. Now that picture is a painting done by the brother of Yogananda Paramahamsa, based on a description given by Yogananda Paramahamsa, who said that he had seen Shri Guru Babaji in a vision. Not actually, but in a vision. This is the picture. Now why I am mentioning this is because one day when I was walking with Maheshwarnath Babaji, whom I should continue to refer as Babaji, in Badrinath, I told him that this beautiful picture of our Paramaguru, Shri Guru Babaji, is there in the autobiography of Yogi. It's beautiful, which I had read. He said, it is beautiful, it's an artist's rendering, but there is another picture which is even more identical to as Babaji looks. So I asked him, where is it? So he said, it is hanging in the bedroom of the Ravalji at Badrinath. So I said, shall we go and see it? He said, Abhi nahi, not now. So I kept quiet. I was like that. He always, when he blew the whistle, I shook my tail and went. And when he blew the whistle, I went away. So when he said, don't want, I said, don't want, fine. Once I even told Babaji, he said, what do you think about yourself? You and me. I said, I think of myself as a dog sitting in front of you, looking at you, listening to you, his master's voice, HMV. And he said, but don't shake your tail too much. Zyada dum nahi hilana, he said. Anyway, so that was our, so I said, okay, fine. Many years later, and then he gave me the history of how that picture of Shri Guru Babaji came to be in the Ravalji's room in Badrinath. Ravalji is the chief priest of the temple. He said there was one priest, one of the Ravaljis, who was a great bhakta of Badrinarayan. So he used to go off when he was not doing puja, free hours, to the back of the temple and meditate in Charana Paduka. So one day when he was meditating in Charana Paduka, he saw a vision. He saw somebody, not vision, he actually saw somebody. Now, according to Babaji, it was Shri Guru. But the Ravalji thought that it was a vision of Badrinarayan, sitting in Padmasana. Badrinarayan is the only form of Narayana who sits in Padmasana in meditative pose. So when he came back home to his room, he was an amateur artist. So using vegetable colors, he painted a picture of whom he saw, who he thought was Badrinarayan, but it is Shri Guru or Mahavatar or whatever you want to call him. That picture was lying in the room of the bedroom of the Ravaljis for many years. This was the picture, and that is the picture which I have used in my autobiography. You will find a picture of Shri Guru Babaji, which is a copy of the picture that hangs even today in the bedroom of the Ravaljis. Now the Ravaljis have come to know that it is Shri Guru, so they have taken prints and kept it in front. When they sit, there is also a picture of Babaji there. Now, this picture came to me because when once we went to Badri Kedar in Rishikesh, Nanu came with us, and he is an amateur photographer, but he is almost a professional. So he had a beautiful camera which looked somewhat like here, and with that we went to then Ravalji and asked his permission, can we take a picture? They didn't know at that time what it was. They said it has been lying here for years. It is a painting of Badrinarayan. Said, can we take a picture of that? He said, no problem. Vishnu Nambudripad was the Ravalji at that time. So then Nanu, with his camera and lights and all that, he took a close-up of that, and then he printed it and distributed it to us. And that is the picture that you will find in my autobiography. It is very similar to the one in Autobiography Yogi, but it is a little more, according to Babaji, more resemblance to Sri Guru Babaji, and it is a little roughly done. It's not very finely done. Anyway, so I stayed with Babaji, with Maheshwarnath Babaji, in the cave at Charana Paduka behind the Badrinath temple, and I spent many days with him, off and on. We used to travel and come back again, stay there. Many of the lessons which I learnt, much of the knowledge that I had gained, which is with me today, and because of which I am able to teach people, those who want to learn, came from those days of instruction in Charana Paduka. I learnt not only how to study Vedanta, how to practice meditation, or how to practice Kriya Yoga, which is our parampara. I also learnt how to cut vegetables, how to cook food, how to go for bhiksha, how to keep the kutir clean. Babaji told me once, if you cannot cut vegetables properly, you cannot understand Vedanta. He was a real taskmaster and a real teacher who taught me every little thing, how to live, what to do. Of course, I may not have been such a perfect disciple, so I might commit mistakes, but this was the teaching, the instruction. And he was more than a father and mother. I think he was father, mother, friend, all guru, all rolled into one. I never kept anything in my mind. I exposed my mind to him, and he worked on it in his own way. Sometimes actual work, sometimes invisible work, which you cannot make out until the results come forth. So this was my life with Maheshwarnath Babaji. Now, before I end my story about Shri Maheshwarnath Babaji, I must mention one more thing, which is that he was one of the oldest and the earliest direct disciples of Sri Guru Babaji. And in the autobiography of a yogi, there is a mention of Lahiri Mahashai, who was Shyamacharan Lahiri was a very advanced yogi and a disciple of Mahavatar Babaji. So in that story, in the autobiography, there is a mention of Lahiri Mahashai going to the Himalayas and meeting Sri Guru Babaji in the cave. That cave is still there. It's in UP near Dwarahat. Now, in that, Babaji sent somebody to him, to Shyamacharan Lahiri, saying, go and bring him inside and show him something. Now, this person who was sent by him to fetch Shyamacharan Lahiri inside was Maheshwarnath Babaji. His name is not mentioned in the autobiography because the author of the autobiography did not know who he was. He has only mentioned that he sent one of his advanced disciples to bring him inside. This is Maheshwarnath Babaji. Now, how did he look? His picture is there in my autobiography. It is not a photograph. It's also a painting, because Sri Guru Babaji was dead against being photographed. He always resisted being photographed. And knowing that I was myself an amateur artist, he prohibited me from painting or drawing any likeliness of himself, because he was against any form of people worshipping him in any way. He was a man who walked barefoot all along the Himalayas, or even when he came back down the Himalayas, barefoot, no ashram, no organization, no banner. The only thing he possessed was a white cloth which reached from the waist to the knees, and a kamandalu and a rudraksha mala on his neck. There was nothing else that he possessed, not even a pair of Hawaii chappals. And he never got into any vehicle. He always walked. No bus, no car, always walking. And therefore I was also forced to walk with him wherever he went, whenever I was with him. He was a thin, tall man, well built, very fair, with a sparse beard and moustache, and with his hair, matted hair, jata, tied up like a big cone on the top of the head. His eyes were the most extraordinary, because very often questions which were difficult to be understood through discussion and argument could be understood by his mere look into your eyes. That was the most special quality of Babaji that I know of, that I have heard of. Anyway, so I lived with this great being for some years. Now I must tell you the story of Babaji's picture, which is now in the autobiography. How it came about. Even though Babaji had told me not to take a picture of him, not to photograph him, not to paint any picture of him, one day, in my innocence and ignorance, I decided that I would somehow get a photograph of his. Now that's an interesting story by itself. We used to live in Rishikesh for some time in a place called the Gufa of Mauni Baba, Mauni Baba's cave, which is on the other side of the Ganga. In the evening we used to cross over onto this side, sit on the banks of the Ganga in a quiet spot and have lot of discussions for 1 or 2 teaching sessions, Upanishads. I have studied many things sitting there. So, now this story which I am going to relate about Babaji's photograph is not in this autobiography. It will probably come in the sequel which I am working on now. So, every evening we used to come across, sit on the steps and talk. One day, in Lakshman Jhula, if you go, you will find lot of photographers there for tourists. They will say, 5 minutes photograph, and they will give it to you and the next day, a print. So, in that way, I became very friendly with a young photographer, Gadwali boy, who used to be hanging around Lakshman Jhula. So one day I told him, why don't you do me a favor? In the evening I sit in such and such a spot and I have discussions with Babaji. You come there, you don't even show that you know me. You come from the ghat side, keep photographing everything. In between take a quick shot of Babaji also. And then walk up. And then don't see me, tomorrow I will see you and take the photograph. He agreed. So that evening, around 5, I was becoming more and more nervous. I thought, suppose Babaji comes to know somehow and he says, today we won't cross to that side, what will happen? But promptly at 5 o'clock he said, chalte hain us taraf. So I said, okay, fine. As of now, everything is working according to my plan. So we came on to this side. We sat down on the steps of the ghat, the upper steps, and we started discussing something. I waited, I couldn't find this photographer anywhere. So many people were coming and going, but there is no photographer. So we waited till around dusk when the sun is about to set. At about 6:30, Babaji suddenly said to me, "Oh, तुम्हारा photographer अभी नहीं आएगा." He said that your photographer is not going to turn up now. I had not mentioned to him about the photographer at all in the first place. So I was shocked. So I fell at his feet and sought forgiveness. I said, Babaji, I am very sorry. I so value your photograph that I somehow wanted to do it. I won't repeat this ever. I am very, very sorry about this. So Babaji said, doesn't matter, it is all right. And we went back to the cave, to Mauni Baba's cave. And that day, that evening in Mauni Baba's cave, I got a beautiful discussion. I got a beautiful lesson on photography. It was very beautiful. He said, suppose your photographer had come. Suppose. And he had clicked. What if my picture wouldn't have come? How would you stop it? I said, how can you stop it, Babaji? Because if a photographer clicks, it will certainly come in the film. He said, how does an image come in the camera? I said, how? He said, if there is an image and if light falls on it, that light reflects back from the object and goes to the lens and you get the picture. Suppose I know some way by which I can prevent the light that falls on me from reflecting back. Is it possible to take a photograph? I said no. He said that is what would have happened. If the photographer had come, he would not have got a picture. He would probably have got a black outline. That's all he could have got. Because all the light, when it is absorbed, it is black. If all the light is reflected together, it is white. So I got a nice discussion on what light is and how it is affecting and how photography takes place. This whole thing. So this is the story of how I tried to photograph Babaji. Then how did I get the picture in the autobiography? Many years later, while in Madanapalli, one summer morning, I decided that I would make a picture of Babaji, because I thought that stricture was laid many years ago. Now it would have gone. So at least for my own satisfaction. So nobody was at home. I took a drawing board, fixed a white drawing paper onto it with pins, took Indian ink and a brush, black brush, and from my memory I made a beautiful outline of Sri Guru Babaji. Now it was a May day, mid-May, and there were no clouds anywhere there, no sign of rain, absolutely clear sky. I left it outside on the veranda to get some air. I had my lunch and went up to sleep. I woke up from the sleep when I heard rain, heavy rain. There was thunder. So it suddenly occurred to me that I had kept a picture outside to dry. So I came running down, and what do I see? There water and wind have completely wiped the thing out, and there was only the soaked drawing paper sitting there. This was my second attempt at capturing Babaji. Then, when the autobiography was going to come out, I said it is unfair to the readers that we don't have Babaji's picture when I keep saying Babaji, Babaji, Babaji. Sri Guru Babaji is there. What about Maheshwarnath Babaji? So I decided once more let me try an outline. So I sat down and made an outline. There is an art teacher in our school, boarding school, in the People Grow school called Sharat. I took this drawing to him. And I said to him, can you make some alterations to this and show me the result? Make a few frames. He is a graphic designer also. So he made a few frames. I approved of one of them. And that picture is the one that you find in the autobiography. Now I will start from my first day at the cave in Charanapaduka, where I was living with Maheshwarnath Babaji. Now, there was some peculiarities about Babaji. One is, normally he didn't eat food. I mean, he would eat. Rarely when somebody offered food, or sometimes when I cooked a little bit of food, he would eat. But generally, he was not, I felt that he was not hungry really. He would eat for satisfaction of others. The other peculiarity was that I never seen him sleep. When I say sleep, lying down and sleeping. Any time I wake up, when I woke up and looked, he would be sitting straight, looking, sometimes eyes open, sometimes eyes closed. The maximum I have seen him rest is sometimes with his hands he would lean backwards on the cave or near a tree or something like that, but never full stretched, never sleeping. I have not seen him. And he never felt sleepy because of that. He walked almost, when we were walking 20 kilometers a day, and would not be tired at the end of it. There is something very peculiar which we have walked in so many places. And wherever he went, he had taught me how to collect dry firewood twigs and branches. He always carried an axe with him, small axe to cut the branches, and how to light the dhuni fire. Never did he stay in a place without a dhuni fire, which was part of the ritual of the Natha Sampradaya. Now, on the first day, he told me to go down to the village meaning the small settlement near the Badri temple, to a Marwadi's shop, and say that Babaji has asked for provisions. So I went, and that man said, I can bring the provisions to the cave to Babaji. I said, please, I will be punished. He has asked me to bring it, so you don't come, I will take it. So I took some provision, which basically some rice and a few other things. It is very difficult to cook things like dal in Badrinath because the air pressure is very, very low. So basically we did with rice and some aloo, some potatoes and things like that, some chilies. So I brought it. He taught me how to wash it, how to cut it, how to cook it. And when I had prepared the meal, I think for my satisfaction, he took little bit and ate it and said, ah, it's very nice. I knew that it is only for my satisfaction. I was myself not sure how good it was. Anyway, then that evening he started his lessons of teaching me about yoga, about the nadis, about the Shushumna, about the chakras, about the Upanishads, about the Gita. So many things, day by day, little by little. Each session would go around 1 hour or 1.5 to 2 hours, when we would sit and actually discuss the matter face to face, like in the Upanishads. If you read the Upanishads, you will see that the Rishi sits with his disciple and has a dialogue, samvad, which is a discussion. He's not told, this is what it is, you have to accept it. There is a discussion. And after the discussion, one can ask questions and then absorb the knowledge which is given to one. This is the way I was taught throughout. It consisted of samvads, discussions and dialogues between him and me. Of course, he knew and I didn't. That is always there, that difference. Anyway, then one of these days, and I used to sleep in the cave and he used to sit near the dhuni looking out. One of those days, he gave a big discussion. He talked about the fire. And he said, the fire that you see burning before you, which is Agni, which is one of the most important elements in the earth. And it is connected to the human being, because in the human being there is an inner fire which is in the area of the navel, the Manipura chakra, which when awakened, the inner energy which is called the Kundalini is awakened, by which the human being ascends from the lower level to the higher level of consciousness and finally reach freedom, which in yogic terms is called Kaivalya, which means absolutely unconditional, fetterless, free existence, not bound by any desire whatsoever, which is in full happiness, because one is not seeking or craving for anything. To be free of even a single craving, like a craving to drink a cup of coffee or to smoke a cigarette itself, is a great freedom. Now, to live with no craving whatsoever, you can imagine what a wonderful freedom and blissful life it is. And for that, Babaji taught me that the inner fire, which is reflected in the outer fire, has to be kindled. He said that is the real Homa. He said the real Nachiketa Homa is the kindling of the inner fire in the Manipura chakra and not lighting the fire outside. He said lighting the fire outside, goldsmiths also do, blacksmiths also do to melt their iron, but what spiritual benefit do you get out of it? He said the inner fire has to be lit, which is in the Manipura chakra, and that is called the Nachiketas fire, discussed between Nachiketas and Yama in the great Upanishad called the Katha Upanishad. And then Babaji never said anything only theoretical. When he said something, he always gave a practical demonstration of it. He said the fire is a living thing, it's not a non-living thing. And he said, look at the fire for some time. So I fixed my attention on the fire which was lit. He fixed his attention. After a while, he uttered a few bijaksharas of Agni and raised his hand up like this. And I, with my own eyes, I saw the flame going straight up, even as tall as a tree which was in the background. And then, when I was completely astounded, wondering what was happening, he turned his finger like this, and the tip of that turned and hit me in my navel, and it was as if my whole body was on fire. Something was burning inside, and it was very hot, almost unbearable, but at the same time quite blissful. I cannot describe this more than this. And then I found the energy slowly traveling up and coming to the middle of my forehead, and I went into meditation. I remained in that meditation probably for the whole night, because next morning I found Babaji shaking me up and saying, go and brush your teeth and get some provision to cook, because you are hungry, not because he is hungry, you are hungry. So this was my first lesson, and it was my first kindling of the fire inside, which now I am 64, 63, has not gone off, that fire. It's still kindled inside. I mean, if you talk this to a psychiatrist or a dog, he thinks that you're completely nuts, you've gone out with a rocker, but it is there, the fire burns inside. And it's not, because it's not a physical fire, it's the fire which also exhibits, which also manifests when a human being has desire, irresistible desire for something. Only thing is here, the desire fire has been converted into the fire that burns out all the impurities and the dross and takes one to the higher levels of consciousness. This is called the Kundalini fire, and this was my first experience with Babaji. A week later, one day Babaji said, today is your chutti, you are free to go where you want. You can go where you want. It's like a holiday for you. So I decided now in the Himalayas, in that area, where would you go? There only, if you go a little further, there is ice. Otherwise, you can go to the temple. I didn't want to go back to see the Ravalji. So I decided to wander around somewhere near the caves. Further up, 6-7 caves further up, I saw a cave in which the smell of incense was coming, Shambrani. So I went inside and I saw a very wrinkled old Buddhist monk sitting there. He had a prayer wheel in his hand, rotating, and he was keep chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. It was going on, and there was incense burning there. So I went and prostrated, did namaskara and sat down. And after some time he said, I asked him, can you speak English? Speak Hindi? He said, yes. So we started talking a little bit. And then I asked him about Buddhism and about various things, and he gave me a lot of information on that. Then he suddenly said something which was quite extraordinary. When I asked him about, in Tibetan yoga, the Tibetan lamas practice a certain thing called Tummo. Tummo is a kind of pranayam with some visualizations where the inner heat in the system is generated. And they live in the coldest of climates and still don't feel cold because the body starts sweating when this fire is ignited in the navel, the inner fire. So this is called Tummo. So I when he discussed this to me, because he was wearing only one robe, so it was not very, and it was quite cold. Babaji had made sure that I used to wear woolen blankets which he had cut for a hole in the middle for the neck, and a cap and turban and all that. He said, you will fall sick. So I said, that's fascinating. Can you teach me Tumu? He said, it is not so important to learn Tumu. You see, what have I attained? Nirvana by learning Tumu? No, but I can control the temperature. Okay. Then he said something extraordinary. He said, that is not the same as that fire that touched your navel last week. So I said, how do you know? Because nobody knows except me and Babaji. So how does he know that the fire touched my navel last week? He said, I and your Babaji have a different mode of contact. We don't meet each other, but we keep in touch with each other. I said, how? He said, by the mind. You won't understand these matters. It takes some time. By and by, gradually you will begin to understand what it is. He said, I can give you a hint. When the mind becomes absolutely quiet and calm, and even though outwardly it seems to be ruffled because of circumstances, deep down when you meditate, if you see that it is very, very still and quiet and calm, such a mind immediately reflects the thoughts of people who are around you. Whether you want to take it or you don't want to take it, it is your business. You can cut it off if you like. But suddenly you will say, you will experience a thought which doesn't belong to you, and you can be sure that it is coming from someone in the room, from somewhere. It is only a hint, but there are ways and means to practice and perfect the art of it. Again he told me, but it is not so important. The most important thing is to attain nirvana, which is freedom from all the bondages and conditionings of this world. So I lived with Babaji like that for some months in that cave in Charana Paduka. Once in a while going to, crossing the river and going to Mauni Baba's cave. Mauni Baba's cave is on the way to the temple of Nilakanta in the Nilkant hills, which is on the other side of the Ganga. And whenever Babaji went and stayed in the cave, which is called Mauni Baba's cave, it has 3 layers. One cave is there. If you go down the steps, there is another cave. And if you go further down, there is a 3rd cave inside. But whenever Babaji lived in the cave, Mauni Baba used to go up to Nilkant and live there, so that he would be free to be there. And there was a brahmachari who used to serve us, look after us, bring water, clean the place, give me food. He didn't want food, and so on. And then from there we used to walk further up, sometimes on the banks of the Ganga through Lakshman Jhula, further up to Dev Prayag and back, and so on. On one of these trips, it was quite evening when we approached Vashishta Gufa. By the time we reached, we were not coming from the road, coming from those small paths on the banks of the Ganga, which are called by the locals Pagdandi Rastas. Pagdandi means you have to have a stick to move in that area. There are no buses, nothing, it's small paths. So we walked on that path and we came near Vashishta Gufa. So I told Babaji, so we'll spend the night at Vashishta Gufa, that brahmachari is there. He said, no, we will spend the night at Arundhati cave. So that's the first time I saw or heard about the Arundhati cave. So I looked up, and from the Ganga you climb on rocks, and there is a small cave called Arundhati cave. It's still there, and only 2 people can sit or sleep in that. It's a very small cave. So we slowly climbed up, went to the Arundhati cave. Babaji gave me the axe and said, go and find some dry twigs to light the fire. So I went and got some twigs. He said, if you are hungry, you can go down to Vashishta Gufa, have some food from that brahmachari there and come up. So after gathering the food and lighting the dhuni, I went down and met Swamiji and I said, I said, "Oh," I said, Babaji is there. So he said, I will also come. He came and he bowed down, did namaskaram and came back. So I stayed in the night there. Now you must understand, those days the forest area was quite large. Now much of it has depleted in Rishikesh and other areas. And wild elephants used to roam near Mauni Baba's cave, and in this Arundhati cave and Vashishta Gufa areas, leopards were very common at night. So Babaji always told me, don't go out at night unless you tell me. Don't go alone. So I had not encountered a leopard till then, but the warning was there, so I was careful. Now this Arundhati cave is a very, very long cave. It is must be about 10 feet in length, maybe, not more than that, and about maybe 6 feet or 7 feet in width, becoming narrower as you go inside. And in front of that, on the mouth, Babaji built up the dhuni. I helped him to build up the dhuni, and we lit the fire, and he would sit there and meditate, and I was supposed to sleep inside. I would sleep inside with my feet towards him, and he would sit facing the dhuni and looking out. And below was the Ganga. Living in Arundhati cave, I had learned many ways to meditate, and one of them was, Babaji said, just sit and look at the river. Follow the river as it moves. Don't think of anything else. So that's open eye meditation. I learned several things living there. But what I want to tell you are two extraordinary incidents that happened to me during my stay in the Arundhati cave. Two really extraordinary. One of them is so unbelievable that people wonder if it's fact or fiction, but you must remember that fact is stranger than fiction many times. All fiction is produced from fact, which is sometimes so strange that one doesn't even know if it is fact or fiction. And this happened one night. No, before that I will tell you the other story. One day I was sitting there and meditating. My attention was fixed in the Ajna Chakra, which is the middle of the forehead. It is also called Bhru Madhya, meditating. Now, from childhood, from my young age, I was very fond of masala dosa. Now, for some reason, when I was sitting and trying to meditate on Om and the Ajna Chakra, the only image that was coming was masala dosa. So, I felt that this nice smell of masala dosa. Somebody, maybe after many years of being deprived from natural food, I mean that kind of food. So Babaji suddenly woke me up and said, are you meditating on the Ajna Chakra? I said, yes. Does Ajna Chakra look like masala dosa? I said, Babaji, I can't help it. This image is coming into my head. I cannot help it. He said, I think what you should do is to go tomorrow. I will take you somewhere where you have as many masala dosas as you want and get rid of this craving. So the next day he takes me to, there is a Madras cafe in Rishikesh on the other side, and gets 2 masala dosas, which I finish in few minutes. The third also is ordered, but I can't eat it because I'm already full. He said, are you satisfied with the masala dosa? I said, yes. Okay, now get rid of it. From that time, that inordinate desire and craving for that particular food item is dissolved from my mind. Now this is what is called the Tantra way, the Tantric way, where you satisfy your urges temporarily so that you know what it is and you are free of it. Because many a time, because we have not satisfied that urge, it keeps on bothering us, and as we move forward in the spiritual field, it becomes a big obstacle. So the Tantra system is Bhogo Yogayate, which means, Babaji taught me this, means enjoy, understand and then let go. The problem comes when you cannot let go, all the time enjoying and not being able to let go. So therefore, for such practices, a guru or a teacher is required. Otherwise one may fall into the bottomless pit and always get stuck there in the pool. You cannot come out. So this was a wonderful experience which I had with Babaji. It also confirmed my understanding that he understood every passing thought that flickered through my mind, even for a second. Of course, he didn't say it, but I knew it. And therefore, I was learning how to keep my mind free from thoughts which are disturbing. Because I thought if I get it, he will immediately sense it. It was like someone watching you with a microscope. I knew that he wouldn't punish me for it, but I knew that my heart was an open book to this great being. And because of that, I was guided properly and I was able to advance myself spiritually. Now the second experience, which is really unbelievable, this is not unbelievable, but that one is really unbelievable. One day, one night, I was sleeping in the cave and Babaji was sitting in front of the dhuni, meditating. He was sitting steady with his eyes open. I could see him in that state. Now I was lying down behind the cave, at the end of the cave, with my eyes closed. I was fast asleep. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I heard a sound which was like a thunderclap, as if there is going to be rain, a heavy thunderclap, very, very loud, like an explosion. So I look up and I see something like the moon on the other side of the skyline, and that it is lit from inside, just like the moon, and it is moving forward. And as it moves forward, it is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So I wake up fully. I am completely alert, wondering what is this thing that is coming. And the whole thing comes, it becomes so big, almost this big, and lands right on the dhuni with another thunderclap so loud that I almost am shaken out of my consciousness actually. And I am looking at Babaji and wondering what is happening out of fear. And then very slowly, there is a beautiful perfume like thing wafting from there. Very slowly, this round globe thing opens. It opens like as if it is two doors which are opening. And inside that, I see a very, very strange sight. Inside that sits a big cobra-like structure. It's like a cobra. It's huge. It has a hood. It is much bigger than any snakes that we see. And it is colored like, it's like as if it is made of glass, and it is colored electric blue. Like the sparks that you see when you strike two wires together, complete electric blue and transparent. And it's saying something which I cannot follow. It's like hissing sound, and Babaji is sitting there looking at it, and it seemed to me as if there is a conversation going on between this object and Babaji. And I am lying there shivering with fright, not knowing what to do. Either this is a dream, but it cannot be a dream, but I feel I am awake, or it is something which is in my brain, so I am either going mad, completely crazy, or this is real. If it is real, what is it that I am seeing before me? Something that looks like a cobra, which is made of blue, deep violet blue glass, and it is shining, and it is making some kind of a noise which is like a hiss almost. And Babaji seems to be communicating with it, because he is nodding his head and he is showing his hands, and then suddenly he turns to me at the cave and says, "Idhar aao." So shivering with great fear, I go towards the dhuni where this is. Then he says, "Bend down and do namaskaram, do pranams." So I go from far and do namaskaram to something, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. And the snake, that snake-like thing with its hood, bends down and touches my head. And as it touches my head, I feel a certain thrill going through my system. And for a moment, I understand that this is not a thing from the earth, but something come from a realm about which we have no idea. And then the thing closes, there is another thunderclap, and it's gone. Gone meaning it goes up, becomes smaller and disappears. Now, this looks like a science fiction story, but this is my experience of what I had in the Arundhati cave. In the morning, I asked Babaji, what is this that I saw? Who is this? He says this comes from a realm which is called Nagaloka, and this is the person who is the head of that world which is called Nagaloka. And I said, we have only read of Nagaloka in Puranas or in some other textbooks, but do it really exist? He said, did you see what you saw or you didn't? I said, I saw. If you see it and if you experience it, you better believe it, he said. And then later on, many days later, we had various discussions on different realms. And what I remember very clearly, he said, it is the height of arrogance that the human being thinks that this little speck of dust which we call the Bhuloka, the earth, is the only place where living beings are. He said that is the height of arrogance of the human being to think so. So one day, while sitting outside the cave at Charan Paduka with Babaji, he suddenly turned around and said, now tomorrow we are going to leave for Tolingamat on the way to Kailash. I was very excited because, as I said earlier, there was the old Buddhist Lama who was living in one of the caves in Charan Paduka. He had mentioned about Tolingamat to me. He said that across the border into Tibet, not too far from the Indian border, there was a famous Buddhist monastery called the Tolingamat. I was very excited because I had always thought of walking into Tibet and seeing monasteries and sadhus and lamas there. So Babaji said, yes, we are going tomorrow. So all preparations were made. In the morning, we went to see the Ravalji. Now I was waiting for what the reaction would be, because the Ravalji had first of all discouraged me from being there, saying that there are no genuine sadhus or no genuine, he had not heard of any genuine yogis, and that I was wasting my time looking for a guru and so on. So I thought, what would be the reaction when Babaji meets the Ravalji? So we went. I was surprised because the Ravalji stood up and prostrated before Babaji and said, oh, this young gentleman has found you. And Babaji said, yes, I have found him. He said, yeah, I was discouraging him from falling into the hands of false gurus and frauds. Babaji said that was a good thing to do. So, but the most surprising aspect of this was that Babaji was speaking in Malayalam, and that also in the northern Malayalam accent, northern side of Malayalam, which the Ravalji also spoke, from a Nambudri family from Payanur, which is in the northern end of Kerala. They spoke for some time, and then all preparations were made. Ravalji said, we are making all preparations, Babaji, don't worry, and so on. We also provided with Nepalese man. I think his name was some Bahadur, I can't remember that, not Tegh Bahadur, some Bahadur. Anyway, so this man was supposed to accompany us, and Marwadi merchant provided us with tents and horses. So we started out armed with a gas stove and kerosene oil and so on. But before we did that, while we were going, I sat down quietly and Babaji was standing up and looking at the river. I asked him, Babaji, are you from Kerala? Are you a Malayali? So, are you a Malayali? Babaji said, why do you ask? I said, it's because you are speaking in perfect Malayalam with Nambudiri. He said, no, I am not from Kerala. Oh, then he said, so you must be thinking the same which most people think, that Babaji must be omniscient, he knows any language in the world. He said, that is not the case. He said, there is no human being on this earth, born of a father and mother, biologically, who is omnipresent, omnipotent or omniscient. He said, there are always limitations, there is no such thing. I said, then how do you know the Malayalam which you are talking, since you are not from Kerala? He said, but there are ways in which you can connect to somebody else's brain and understand temporarily what that person is thinking of. Tune into somebody's brain and use his knowledge. That's all one can do. Nobody can be omniscient. So I said, okay. I said, that is not a full explanation. I still want to ask you, where are you from? He laughed and said, we'll discuss that later. Anyway, so the next day we started off. Babaji, the Nepalese Gurkha, I started calling him simply Bahadur. So Bahadur and myself, plus 2 horses, one for carrying the tents and other things and one for emergencies, some cooking pots and gas stove and so on, with good supply of drinking water, which was put in pots and tied on both sides of the podi. Started off. Now, this path which we were taking is not frequented by most people who go to Kailash. It's the old route which is supposed to have been the route taken by Shri Rama when he visited Kailash in the ancient times. So now hardly anybody goes. Anyways, about 35 kilometers from Mana, you come across the Indian border from where Tibet starts. It's all controlled now by the Indo-Tibetan border police. That time there was not much of a police or army presence there. Anyway, so we went up to Vashishta Gufa, camped at Vashishta Gufa for the night, and next morning we started off towards Kailash. Now the path to take is to follow the course of the Saraswati river. There is no other way you can find out. Babaji apparently knew the path, and this Bahadur who came with us, he said he had once travelled with some merchants trading in Tibet, across Tibet. So we passed the Saraswati river. We came to a place called Keshav Prayag, where the Saraswati meets Alkananda, and then from there we started. There was no path actually, we had to climb over rocks, many places, and walk along. River followed us throughout, it was beautiful. And then the sights of the Himalayas are something that's so thrilling. At a distance I could see the Nila Parvat, the blue mountain. We have Nilagiris here, but they are not half as blue as the Nila Parvat. And snow covered, other peaks jutting out from the scene. And nothing but snow all around, hardly any vegetation, and becoming colder and colder day by day. In about 13 days or so, traveling this way, camping at places where there was a small clearing, where this Bahadur used to clear up the snow and the ice and pitch the tent and cook food for us, we proceeded. Babaji, of course, as usual, never slept, but I slept soundly throughout the journey because I was dead tired. Meditation, of course, every now and then Babaji would wake me up from meditation saying, this is not Turiya, this is Sushupti, deep sleep. Anyway, so we passed a wonderful time. I had some discussions also with him during that period. Part of it I have written in the autobiography, but not the whole thing. One was about the Nath Panth to which he belonged. And the other was his connection with Sri Guru Babaji, who was his Guru. So finally we came to the Mana Pass, the famous Mana Pass. We crossed the Mana Pass. It took us a whole day to go because the Mana Pass is 18,000 miles above sea level. So we had to cross it. While we were crossing, there was a terrible storm. Somehow we managed, although I was shivering. The Gurkha had a lot of experience in that, so he was fine. He wore a thick coat, but Babaji, as usual, wore only the small cloth which he normally wore, bare-bodied. And I was wearing thickly clothed in all kinds of woolen things and a woolen cap and a muffler. Babaji said, "You better wear it, otherwise you will fall sick." So we went. Finally, we cleared the Mana Pass and came down to the Tibetan side in about 2 days. Suddenly we found that the temperature had become not so severe and the earth was reddish, a lot of red mud there, and people were growing small little herbs and little bit of vegetable and all that. In about 4 days, halting in the night and so forth, we reached Toling Mutt. Now this Toling Mutt is situated in Tibet. One of the most important features of the Toling Mutt is that it has a Buddha whose head touches the roof of the monastery. It's a huge Buddha. And also around Buddha in that monastery there are so many other Hindu gods and goddesses, Bhadrakali and Hanuman and other devis, and you name them, all the Dasha Mahavidyas are there. But the lamas only do puja to all these. And there was a head lama who is known as the Rinpoche, who welcomed Babaji as if you knew him for a long time, and asked us to stay and be their guests at the monastery. But Babaji never stayed in anywhere like that, so we had to pitch a tent and stay just outside the monastery. The tent was quite comfortable for about 3-4 people, so 3 of us were there. Horses were tied outside, and we spent the night. The night I had a wonderful discussion with Babaji about various things. One of them was that the lamas of Toling Mutt believed that originally Badrinath was in Toling Mutt, and since it was inaccessible to most people, later on it was shifted to the place where it is now. Of course, the Lama believed that Badrinarayan is a form of Buddha because he sits in Padmasan, but that may be his belief. We are not sure. I asked Babaji about this. He said we don't enter into such controversies. Sufficient to say that if you have a religious bent of mind, if you lead a good life, and if you practice meditation, that's sufficient. It doesn't matter whether Buddha is Narayana or Narayana is Buddha. Don't get into these controversies. So there was no more discussion on that subject. Anyway, spent some time there, and then I also saw some very strange sight. There are these tall Tibetan men who come from the province of Kham. If you write in English, it can be spelled as Kham, Kham district. They're very tall people, and they are usually messengers who take messages from one monastery to another. Now these people had with them long sticks which is like a pole they use for pole vault, and when they carried messages they used to do a certain breathing exercise, hit the pole on the ground like a pole vault and travel quite a distance before landing. So this is why they were appointed as messengers, because they had learned the art of almost flying with the stick. This is the nearest levitation that I have seen in my life, apart from the magic tricks that are shown on stage. Anyway, so I saw them pushing, taking a deep breath and moving quite a distance before again putting the pole down. These were the messengers of the monasteries. Anyway, so after spending about 4 days and having various discussions with the lamas about Buddhism and so on, Babaji said, now we can start for Kailash. So we started off. We had reached Tolingmat, and from there we had to go through another village. I think it was called Damal or something. So we reached there in about 6 days. Altogether, we camped there at that little village. Altogether, we had traveled around 21 days, starting from Mana, Badrinath. Now we halted there for the night in a tent. And that night, I had such a serious fever. That the temperature was so high that I started getting convulsions. So, Babaji said, no Kailash for you this time. We have to go back. I said, but Babaji, I wanted to go to Kailash. He said, you might have wanted to go to Kailash. You will go to Kailash after many, many years with a big group of people. But this time you will travel from the Nepal side. So I gave up. Anyway, I was very ill. I had high temperature. I was shivering. In fact, I thought I was having what you call, when you have high fever, hallucinations. Because I was lying in the, I was there sick for at least 4 days. I was lying in the tent on my little wooden plank when suddenly I saw the tent door open. Now the Lama was giving me medicines for the last 4 days, but this didn't seem to have any effect. I was still having high temperature. I saw somebody coming inside from the tent, from the opening door of the tent. Now this person who came from the door didn't look like a human being. He looked more like, what shall we compare with? He looked like a gorilla, something like a gorilla. I couldn't see clearly because the only light inside the tent was a small kerosene lamp which was lit, hurricane lamp which was lit by Bahadur. So in this faint light, all I could see was there was this thing looking like a monkey or a gorilla, but big size, like a human being. As it walked in, and it was making a peculiar whining, thin-pitched, sharp-pitched voice, like that kind of sound. And it or he kept coming towards. When it passed the light, the hurricane lamp, I noticed that it had body was full of fur and there were no clothes. And the fur was kind of light, dark cream colored fur. It came straight towards me where I was lying. I was really paralyzed with fear. It looked at me and again made that whining noise. My mind went back to some comic books where the Yeti comes in the Himalayas and tries to kill people and so on. So I was paralyzed with fear, but it did nothing of the sort. It came near me and pushed something into my mouth. Some very gooey stuff like chewed chewing gum or melted chewing gum or some very, very sweet stuff in my mouth, pushed it in with its finger and then ran out. When it was running out, the Bahadur came running in saying, mountain man, pahadi admi. He came running inside. He was also very frightened. He said, are you all right? I said, I am all right. And I was chewing that stuff. I swallowed it. Whole night I could not sleep because all the time I was looking at the entrance to the tent, wondering when the creature was going to come. Anyway, to cut the long story short, in about 2 hours time I fell asleep without my knowledge, unconsciously, and when I woke up in the morning there was no temperature, no fever, I was perfectly all right. So Babaji said, okay, we pack up, we are going back to Badrinath. I said, Babaji, I am all right now. He said, I know you are all right, we are going back. So we most of the time on the way back, I was sitting on the horse and going. So then I asked Babaji, Babaji, do you think what I saw was a Yeti? He said, let's not have a discussion. Nobody is going to believe you. Most people don't believe in its existence. And if you say you had high fever when you saw it, they would think that you were having some kind of a hallucination. So don't discuss the subject. I said, no harm if I say I saw it. He said, that is left to you. So we came back to Badrinath and it took us, I think, around 18 days, much less time than we took to go there. Around 18 days we were back at Badrinath and back to the cave at Charanapaduka. After I reached there one morning, I went to see the Ravalji. I told Babaji, I'm going to see the Ravalji. He said, go. So I went to Ravalji and after saying namaskara and all that, I said, how do you know Babaji? Because you are talking as if you are familiar with him. He said, well, I know him as a genuine yogi who lives in these areas, but I don't know anything more about him. But my forefathers have said 3 successors, and before that my father has said that they have also met him. So we don't know how old he is, although he looks around 35. He's a great yogi. You are lucky that he found you, because generally I have heard that he did not accept any disciples. So you are very lucky. So I said, okay. I said, then is he from Kerala? What do you suspect? He said, no, I don't think he's from Kerala. He was talking Malayalam. He said, that is, great yogis can do what they want. So I said, so you believe in great yogis, because you are discouraging me. There is no. He said, I discouraged you because you don't fall into the wrong hands. There are so many ganja sadhus around here. There are so many people who are very learned and scholarly who pretend to be great yogis. So I was only trying to help you out. So I said, all right. So he said, since you are going, please take some prasad with you and go back to the cave. And if you tell Babaji that it is Badri Narayan's prasad, he will also eat it. Otherwise, I know that he doesn't usually eat. So I said, all right. So I thanked him, took the prasad and went back to the cave. Now this Charanapaduka, it's a very interesting place. After many years, both things came true. One is I took a whole group of people and went to Kailash. 2, whenever we went to Badri or Kedar with a group, we used to go to Charanapaduka and go near the caves and meditate and walk around. Many of our friends have sat with me and meditated at Charanapaduka, because I believe that there is a strong presence of Sri Guru Babaji in that place. This is the importance of Charanapaduka. The Jains also come there, because for them it is a holy place. One of their Tirthankaras has come there, maybe Parashvanath, I am not sure, and has done tapasya there. So they have 2 footmarks which they consider to be the Charanapadukas of their Tirthankaras. So many Jains come there on pilgrimage. If you move a little further up, the whole right side is dotted with caves. If you go further down, there is a glade where horses, you will see wild horses grazing there. It's completely green. It's a very beautiful place. Now, those who would want to go there, the best way to do would be to go to Badrinath, walk along the road that approaches Badrinath, but in the reverse direction, opposite direction, and then you find steps going up the hills from there on the right side. If you stand there and look straight on the opposite direction, you will see the Nilakant Parvat. You will see a photograph of the Nilakant Parvat on the cover page of my autobiography, especially when the sun rises. It's a beautiful sight to see, because only the top becomes golden and the rest is all white and beautiful. It's a sight for poets, for artists, for people who enjoy nature to go to such places. Even if you are not religiously inclined and you don't want to go for a pilgrimage, I think it's a great idea to visit Badri, Kedar, especially in the season when the snow has not fully melted. You can see these beautiful peaks when the sun rises and the sun sets, and the whole atmosphere is so different that you would automatically get a meditative feeling. And if you sit down and meditate, there is the influence of these great beings around. Now, having said that, while staying at Charnapaduka, I used to take short walks with Babaji towards Vyasa Gufa and towards what is known as Swarga Arohini. Swarga Arohini is little beyond the Vyasa Gufa. That's supposed to be the place that goes on to Alkapuri from where Alakananda starts. And the Puranas say that when the Pandavas, after the Kurukshetra war and after Yudhishthira laid down gave up his kingdom and decided to walk out, having put his son in place, all the Pandavas walked up the same route from Mana and continued to go to the Bhimtal near Saraswati river and walk towards the, what is it called, Alkapuri. On the way, there is a spot from where Yudhishthira is supposed to have fallen. Fallen means where the Purana says where he was lifted up into heavens. Now therefore, that place is called Swarga Arohi. That means a place from where he went off to Swarga. There's an interesting story. Yudhishthira had a dog, a pet dog, which was very dear to him. So the story is that when the chariot came, when the Pushpa Vimana came to take Yudhishthira up to Swarga, he said, "No, I cannot come alone. I have to take my dog." And he said, "But the dog has not done the punya that you have done." He said, "Either the dog comes with me or I don't go." So finally, the pilots of the Pushpa Vimana had to agree to take the cargo, the dog also along. So the dog was also booked to Swarga. Interesting story, because Yudhishthira, you will notice, was a great king who, after the Kurukshetra battle, when he became the king, he decided that he would not rule the kingdom. He was very unhappy. He said, "What is the use of a kingdom where so many people have been killed? So many of my relatives are dead. What kind of a kingdom should I rule over?" In spite of he being told by his brothers that it is not your fault that they were killed, he insisted that he would not rule the kingdom. He would rule only as long as his son is ready to take over. And then he moved off into the mountains to the Badrinath and Kedar towards his complete freedom. Therefore, he is referred to in the ancient Puranas as Dharmaraja, the king of Dharma. How many kings do we see nowadays? Who would want to give up his seat or his kingdom? It's as if they put Fevicol on the seats when they sit down and they cannot get up. So these are the great kings who are not only rulers but also great saints, people whose mind had expanded. Now I am going to tell you about my visit with Babaji to the Valley of Flowers. It's a beautiful valley of flowers, which has been so much nowadays in the modern, daily news, because lots of tourists have started going to the Valley of Flowers. And then from there to a place called Hemkund Sahib, which is now considered to be the holy place for the Sikhs, although everyone can go there. First we'll start with the Valley of Flowers. So one day Babaji said, now we will start for the Valley of Flowers. Now, he used to make fun of me, saying that there are roller skates on your feet, you can't stay in one place. But actually he had super speed roller skates on his feet. He could not stay for more than 4 days in one place, he would start off. So he said, we'll go to the Valley of Flowers. So naturally the only mode of transport with Babaji was walking. So we walked from Badrinath, took 2 days to come, 2-3 days to come to Pandukeshwar. Then from Pandukeshwar we walked on to a place called Govind Ghat. In Govind Ghat, from ancient times there has been a small Gurudwara, which is basically a tent. It's a tent. Now they have built it and made it into a very big building, but in those days it was only a tent Gurudwara. And there was one Ragi. Ragi is the word used for the Pujari people who look after the Gurudwara among the Sikhs. They also read the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the holy book of the Sikhs, in a particular raga, so they are called Ragis. So there was this gentleman. So I went to him and I stayed for 2-3 days in the Gurudwara. One very interesting thing about a Gurudwara, which is good for everybody to know, is that in any Gurudwara, in any part of India, even abroad, if you have a visa to go, is that you can go and stay in a Gurudwara for 3 days and you will also get boarding and lodging. Food also will be given to you for 3 days free of charge. Nobody will ask you what religion you belong to, where are you coming from. 3 days is allowed. If you want to stay for more than 3 days, then you will have to get special permission. So the kitchen, which is called the langar, is open all the time. Anybody who goes is supposed to be fed, which is part of the Sikh religion. So I went to Govind Ghat and stayed in the Gurudwara with the Ragi. We got very friendly. He taught me many things about the Sikh religion. Actually, when I came back, he became so friendly. He said, you must go to the Akali Takht in Amritsar and become a Sikh. I said, I am not ready to become a Sikh. I only want to study about the Sikh religion. Anyway, so from him I found out the route, how to go to, that was later. Babaji was with me, so there was no problem. So both of us stayed in the Gurudwara. And I also found that the Ragi was very respectful of Babaji. Whenever he saw him, he used to call him as Mahan and Guru and so on, which the Sikhs rarely use, because for them their Gurus are only their Gurus starting with Guru Nanak to Guru Gobind Singh. From there we went to a place called Gangria. That is the next stop. In Gangria, this beautiful river flowing under the bridge. It's a very interesting place. Very few hotels are there now, but in those days there was nothing. But there was a sadhu, Bairagi sadhu, belonging to the Juna Akada, who had a little kutir there. So Babaji knew him, or he knew Babaji. So we spent about 2 nights at Gangria with him. He would light the dhuni and sit and talk. But he was a sadhu who, many of the Juna Akada sadhus, they smoke the chilam, which is the hashish or ganja or whatever you want to call it. But otherwise he was perfectly all right, but this habit he had. When he offered it to me, I said, I don't use this stuff. So he said, yeah, I know, you're Babaji's disciple. You are all Raj Yogis, you don't require this, things like that. We spent some time there. Then he said, why don't you ask Babaji to give you Shri Vidya? I said, Babaji gives me what he wants. I never ask him for anything. He said, no, but you should ask, it will help you. So I said, I will see if there is the right opportunity, then I will ask him. And then anyway, so from there we proceeded to the left. Now from Gangria there are 2 roads. The left road goes to the Valley of Flowers, and the right one, which is quite a stiff climb, goes to Hemkund Sahib. So first we went to the Valley of Flowers. Valley of Flowers is the most beautiful thing you can imagine. It's as if there are different flowers. I think most flowers in the world are there, and they're all in different patches. It is as if somebody is doing gardening, but there are no gardeners. It's a natural thing. One stretch you will find certain flowers, another stretch you will find certain flowers. So it's like a patchwork, colored patchwork of flowers. You should go in the right season actually. I can't remember, it's probably August, September or something like that, when the flowers are in full bloom. And there are some flowers which give such a beautiful odd smell, perfume, that you get half intoxicated by the smell of the perfume. So it's a completely a place out of this world. And very often you see botanists going around from foreign countries trying to see which species these flowers are, because it seems there are flowers in the Valley of Flowers which are nowhere else in India except perhaps in Switzerland or some other exotic place. Babaji took me around and I was extremely surprised when I found that, like speaking Malayalam to the Ravalji, he knew every flower, its botanical name, its source, its species, its genus, which I don't know, so I cannot explain it to you. He said this is called Edelweiss. He said this is called the blue something, I don't know. So he had such a knowledge of botany and flowers and nature that it's mind-boggling. You cannot imagine a human being with so much understanding of so many things put together. Anyway, then he took me to a place of a cliff from where in 1941, I believe, a botanist, a lady botanist from abroad, from Europe, fell down and died while looking for some species. It still made us a plaque with her name. I can't remember the name now. I have mentioned it in my autobiography. So the thing is, I never keep a diary. I have never recorded anything in a piece of paper. But when I started writing the autobiography, every time I sat and wrote, all the information used to flow very naturally and come. But now if you ask me the names, I can't remember. I can read it from the autobiography, but I cannot remember offhand. Anyway, so then Babaji led me to a place where there is a lovely little cave surrounded by hills. He said he and Shri Guru have come and sat there and meditated very often. It's such a cozy and wonderful place that suddenly you are cut off from the cold, extreme cold around. And I found that my meditation was proceeding in a different direction than normal. There was a kind of half sleep kind of feeling when you sat down, floating kind of feeling. So when I expressed this to Babaji that this meditation is quite different, it's like falling asleep but not asleep, but very pleasant. He said that is because of the smell coming from some exotic flower around that is creating this kind of effect on my brain. Anyway, then we came back to Ghangriya, spent the night again in this Juna Akada Sadhu's place, and then the next day morning we started off going to Hemkund Sahib. We decided to do the whole stretch in one day. It was quite a tough climb. Normally people stop for a short while at some place which I forget the name and then go the next day and come back. We decided to go the whole hog, completely go the same day, climb up and reach Hemkund Sahib. So we travelled means walked, trekked, and I found that there were, even in those days, hundreds of Sikh pilgrims travelling up Hemkund Sahib, everyone saying Sat Shri Akal, Vaheguru, Vaheguru, and going up. And in many points they would set up small tents and distribute food to the pilgrims who came. Anyway, finally, after trekking for a whole day, by evening we reached Hemkund Sahib. Now the Hemkund Sahib, the name Hemkund means the lake of ice, Hemkund, and it's actually a lake of ice. There is a small portion where you can see the water, the rest is all frozen, and you're surrounded by these beautiful snow-clad mountains on all sides wherever you look. And there were some really religious Sikh pilgrims who were jumping into the water to have a bath. I asked Babaji, should we have a dip? He said, are you crazy? You get sick. So I abstained from going into the lake. But it's a beautiful lake, beautiful sight, and it's so quiet and calm that the mind goes into a meditative state very, very naturally. We went to the Gurudwara. There's also a temporary little Gurudwara which was a tent, and had hot khichdi and papad, that's what I remember. And then from there, Babaji said, 4 kilometers beyond, 4 or 5 kilometers, there is an old Lakshman temple which is abandoned and nobody was doing any pujas or anything there. He said, let's go to this temple and spend the night for 2-3 nights and meditate and come back. I said, all right. So we went. It is a complete small little temple, totally dilapidated. There's an image which they claim to be the image of Lakshmana. That's the only temple for Lakshmana, I think, anywhere individually. And the idol was looking very dirty and unattended and unlooked after. So Babaji said, let's clean it. So we fetched some water from the nearby. There are waterfalls here and there, tiny, tiny waterfalls coming, very beautiful. Took some water in the Kamandalu and got it nicely cleaned. And we spent the night there. All the 3 nights, we had a beautiful meditation. Babaji explained to me the different sects that belong to the Nath Panth and how many Nath Panth ashramas or mathas are there in India now, starting with Gorakhpur and so on. And we had a very, very useful time apart from the beauty and the meditative excellence of that place. The story is, somewhere in his writings, Guru Gobind Singh, who is the last Guru of the Sikhs, has said that in his previous birth, some previous birth, he had come to Hemkund Sahib and meditated in that little place where the present Lakshman temple is there. This is the story, which is why all the Sikhs go to Hemkund Sahib. From that, another legend has sprung up that Guru Gobind Singh in his previous life was also Lakshman. So we cannot authenticate these stories, these are our popular beliefs. But the fact is that there is an old Lakshman temple in Hemkund Sahib, and Hemkund Sahib is one of the most beautiful places where one can go and meditate. But unfortunately, nobody can stay there for more than a day or two because it is extremely cold, and in any case only 3 or 4 months in a year. After that there is no Gurudwara, nothing there, everybody winds up and comes down because the whole place is completely covered with snow. It is 15,500 or so feet above sea level. This is Hemkund Sahib. Anyway, so we came back, again spent the night in Ghangriya with the sadhu, and then walked to Govind Ghat, from Govind Ghat to Pandukeshwar, and spent some time there. In the Pandukeshwar is the temple where the Pandavas are supposed to have halted on their way to Badrinath. So we spent some time there, and then we decided, Babaji decided that we would go to the Pancha Kedars. Now, most people know only of one Kedar, which is Kedarnath. Thing is, that is the most popular of the Kedars where people go, and it's the most famous, and of course it is the biggest. But there are other Kedars which are, including Kedarnath, they are called Pancha Kedars. So there are 4 more Kedars. One of them is Madh Maheshwar. The other is Rudranath. The third is Tunganath, and the fourth, can't remember right now the name. Anyway, there are these 4 Kedars. So Babaji said, now we are visiting the 4 Kedars, and then finally we will go to Kedarnath. I had never visited Kedarnath before. It was not, we hadn't traveled to that area till then. So we started off from Pandukeshwar, walking along, taking a right turn and then continuing to walk. We passed many small villages, and in the evening we reached, I think it was Madh Maheshwar. This is the problem, the names seem to escape. Anyway, one of the Kedars, let's say, we reached there. But on the way, the scene was so beautiful. No, we halted in between in a small village where the village head came to welcome Babaji. So I knew that he must be very well known in that area, as he has travelled a lot. So finally we came there. I think it was in Madh Maheshwar before that. Next day we walked on to Madh Maheshwar, where again in the small village we were met by the village head, the Sarpanch, who came with a lot of followers saying, Babaji has come, and they all prostrated, brought food, brought water, brought flowers, wild flowers. And Babaji showed me many of those trees there. He said they are all herbal in content, and they can be made into important Ayurvedic and Siddha medicines. So he showed me all around. And here and there you saw beautiful green and blue lakes, and the villages were so simple. They were worshipping in little gram devtas everywhere and offered food to whoever passed that way, because hardly anybody came that way. It was a pagdandi rasta, there are no motorable roads anywhere. Another interesting thing I found was there is an Ayurvedic gum, a resin called Shilajit, which is used in medicines. I saw for the first time Shilajit coming out of certain rocks. It's a kind of a mineral-like thing. Babaji showed me this is Shilajit. This is the source of the Ayurvedic medicine, usually used for Kaya Kalpa, to rejuvenation. Anyway, so we passed and spent some time in Madh Maheshwar. Madh Maheshwar, there was a priest who lived in the village. So he came and he did puja for the shivling there. It's a very simple shivling with a stone granite structure around. Now in these beautiful places, the ceramic tiles have not yet reached. So the temples are very beautiful. They don't look like bathrooms, because no ceramic tiles and glazed tiles have ever reached there. It's still made of granite and rock. It's very beautiful. Anyway, so in Madh Maheshwar, we spent the night, and we were on our way to Rudranath the next day. So on the whole, by the time we reached Madh Maheshwar, it would have taken us about 4 days, I think, 4.5 days. Then we walked towards Rudranath. And Rudranath is again one of the most important of the Panchakedars. There, the linga is very small, the temple is completely dilapidated, there is no puja being performed, there is nobody in sight except a village which is 20 kilometers away. So we went, and it took us about 4 days or 5 days to reach from there to Rudranath. On the way, while we were at Madh Maheshwar, the village Sarpanch said that one Yogiji Maharaj who used to live here has now shifted to Rudranath. So if you see him, please offer our prostrations to him. He told Babaji. So I asked Babaji, who is this great Yogiji Maharaj? He said, there is a direct disciple of Shri Guru Babaji, who is my Guru Bhai. And he is also senior to me in a way. He is from the south, and he used to live for many years in Madh Maheshwar. Now he is shifted to Rudranath. So he said, probably we will meet him in Rudranath. So I said, where is he from? He said he's from the south. So where is he from the south? He said he used to live for many years in a place called Tenkashi, which I knew. It's near Chengota side, Tenkashi, where there is a waterfall also, beautiful waterfall. So I don't know his name, but people used to refer to him as Tenkashi Siddhar. He's supposed to have lived there for many years, and then Babaji told him, his Guru Babaji, told him to shift to Mad Maheshwar and then to Rudranath. So I was very excited. I thought I'll see one more great yogi who is Babaji's Guru Bhai. Anyway, we travelled. Now, before reaching Rudranath, we halted for the night in one place where there is a lot of dilapidated temples and no village, nothing. So Babaji said we can't walk today. It is about quite dark, so we'll have to go the next day to Rudranath and we can reach there by morning next day. So I said, all right. So we halted in that place, and I was thinking, what about food for the night? I was just thinking in my mind. Now in Rudranath, there is in this village where we stayed, a lot of dilapidated, broken down structures. So Babaji said we can use one of these. As we approached a place which had like dharamshalas, which means granite pillars with a granite roof covered on all three sides. In front of that, suddenly we found there is a fire burning, dhuni. So I said to Babaji, there is a dhuni here, there must be somebody. He said, here there must be, who comes here? He was himself surprised. Normally he never used to get surprised about anything. As soon as we got in, from inside comes that Tenkashi Siddhar. I guessed it was him. A dark, very dark man, with short and well built, with a lot of ashes on his face, with vibhuti. He comes out and greets Maheshwarnath Babaji. They have a greeting in the Nath Panth called Alak Niranjan. So he says, Alak Niranjan. Babaji shocked. He says, oh, we thought we are going to find you in Rudranath. He said, yeah, I know. I was trying to keep your thoughts away from my mind. Otherwise you would have discovered me long ago. This was a discussion. He said, come in. So we went inside. He asked me, you are from the south? He said, you are from Trivandrum. I said, yes. So Babaji has adopted you as your disciple. He said, before that I must tell you. So since Tenkashi Siddhar was senior to Maheshwarnath Babaji, as soon as he saw him, he tried to do pranams to him. He did not allow. He said, Mahesh, you don't have to do this to me. So he didn't allow him to do that. Babaji told me, do pranams. So I did pranams. Then he said, from Trivandrum. I said, yes. Trivandrum is the border of Tamil Nadu. I said, yes. You know Tamil? பேச தெரியும். சரி, எழுத தெரியாது, வாசிக்க தெரியாது, பேச சரி. Oh, very nice. He was very happy. I said, vanga. So he took us all inside and he told me, this great man never accepts disciples. Usually you are a lucky fellow that he has taken you under his care. So we had a long chat. Then he said, this is your greatest surprise. I have made very good sambar rice and some puriyal for you. So I sat down, and for the first time after so many years, 2 years, I had lovely South Indian meal sitting with Tenkashi Siddhar. It was more than the talk. I think I was more impressed and affected by that food. Then we sat down and had a long chat about various things, and that night Tenkashi Siddhar taught me a lot of things about the Tamil Siddhars, the South Indian system of Shiva Yoga. It's called Tamil Siddhars, belong to the Shaivite order of the South. And he also described to me this great book called Tirumantiram, which was written by a great sage called Tirumular. He said, in the Tirumantiram, you can find the complete A to Z technique and theory of the Kundalini Yoga and the chanting of what is called the Shiva Panchakshara, which is Panchakshara because it is Na, Ma, Shiva, Ya, 5 letters. You add Om, so it's Om Namah Shivaya. Because in Tamil there is no Sha, there is a Chi, so it is Namah Shivaya. So this Panchakshara can be used, each letter of the Panchakshara. This was all taught to me by Tenkashi Siddhar. fixed to any one of our centers, inner centers, which are called chakras, and chanted in various combinations to bring about various effects inside us and outside us. He taught me that, and he also told me the story of Tirumular. He said Tirumular was actually a disciple of Agastya, the great sage Agastya. So, since Agastya had come down to the south and not come back for a long time, Tirumular decided to come from the Himalayas searching for Agastya. So, as he was coming, somewhere in the south of in Tamil Nadu, he came across a sight which made him very sad. A shepherd, which means people who take shepherds for sheep for grazing, had died, and there were lots of goats standing around, feeling very unhappy, not crying like human beings, but crying. So this great yogi felt very sorry for them and wanting to make them happy, he decided to leave his body under a hollow tree and get into the body of this dead shepherd so that the sheep will be happy for a while. Now, this activity in yoga is called, in Tamil, what you call Siddha Yoga. It's called Parakaya Pravesha, which means entering somebody else's body.